Hello and welcome to the Thursday episode of the 905er. I am Joel McLeod.
And I'm Roland Tanner.
And today we pretty much only have one thing to talk about. And part of it stems from an article that Roland wrote for the 905er website. It's up on 905er.ca. We'll have a link in the show notes for you to read so you're up to speed. But it kind of sparked a bit of a discussion locally. And we wanted to kind of touch upon it ourselves. And mostly it focuses on the renaming of schools and the taking down of statues of Canadian historical figures. And I'm not going to paraphrase it any more than that. Roland, why don't you just kind of give us the Coles Notes version of what you wrote?
It is. Well, by the time I finished that article, it really needed Coles Notes because I kind of disappeared down a number of rabbit holes. I mean, the motivation behind it was just reading the stories which are initially in the National Post and now which we're seeing in some of the more local newspapers, kind of throwing... Well, I'm trying not to put this in too pejorative terms, but throwing a little bit of a hissy fit about the renaming of schools, about taking down the statues of John A. Macdonald, taking down the statue of Ryerson, and this idea that by doing so we're cancelling history. And I used to be an honest to goodness historian. I actually got that's how I earned my bread and butter for a decade or so, and. It always makes me laugh when people talk about statues being history, and it's like they're not. They're just so not. They are. I mean, they are a form of history in that they represent a time and the kind of way that we thought at a particular moment in time when they put up, and they represent the point of view of the people who put them up, the people who paid for them, who are usually the powerful and the wealthy and all those things. Those can all be very interesting things for historians, absolutely. But the statue tells you nothing. The statue of Ryerson that was pulled down the other week tells you nothing about Ryerson. In fact, you would have struggled more than a fortnight ago to find anybody in Canada who, well, that's exaggerating slightly, but the vast majority of us, myself included, would not have been able to tell you the first thing about Ryerson, other than that, it was a name that stuck on a lot of things to do with education.
That's what kind of sparked this discussion was the fact that in Hamilton, the Hamilton Public Board is going to rename their Ryerson Public School, same as the Halton Public Board voted to rename Ryerson Public School. And of course, that sparked the debate of, we're going to erase our history. And we were talking just before we hit record on this. Did anybody know who Ryerson was prior to the current debate on residential schools? Our argument was no, nobody knew.
Nobody does. And I put a picture at the end of that article for anybody who gets that far of a statue in Ottawa. And I said, do you know who this person is? And I would be very surprised if anybody did. I certainly wouldn't have done before I looked it up on Wikipedia. And it's Alexander Mackenzie, who is the first Liberal Prime Minister of Canada, whose government passed the first Indian Act, which is, when we're talking about the things that were done to the First Nations to basically try to exterminate them one way or the other by assimilation or by separating people from their parents, so on and so forth. The Indian Act was probably the biggest element in that jigsaw. Nobody knows who could anybody name Alexander Mackenzie? I'm questioning myself right now that I've got his name right.
That was start of so again, something we were talking about is that our education system is so woefully inept when it comes to Canadian history that nobody knows who Ryerson is. Nobody knows who Alexander Mackenzie is. All we know is of John A. Macdonald is, he was the first Canadian Prime Minister and he built the railroad. And
if there's a third fact in there, people will know that he used to drink a bit, and that's usually the sum total of it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, part of it was what kind of got our I don't know what, our backup against the wall in this was indirectly we had David Frum, who if you're a listener of American politics, you know who David Frum is. David Frum was the infamous speechwriter for George W. Bush, who coined the phrase "axis of evil" in George W. Bush's State of the Union one year. He wrote an opinion piece for the Atlantic, basically defending Johnny Macdonald, saying everything wasn't so bad, and he was actually really good to the Indians. And I was like, get off your perch there. First, don't spend your time writing for George W. Bush in America and then come back and say, I'm going to defend Johnny Macdonald, when everything he said is true. But let's be honest, Johnny Macdonald was not kind to First Nations people. He did not view them as an equal.
Nobody did. I mean, and I think it's important. The one point I will certainly make again and again and again is that, Macdonald and Ryerson are currently the figureheads of a process that was Canada in the 19th century, and actually for much of the 20th century as well. That this was, and what Canada was a product of British colonialism and the way that the British viewed the world, which was that we are a superior race. I mean, they didn't put it quite as bluntly as maybe, a certain German gentleman did a few decades later, but it was very much along the same lines. We are a superior race, and it is our obligation as good Christians to civilize the world and to bring our white civilized ways to the savages. This was what Canada was built on. So, to an extent, picking on Macdonald and Ryerson is a little bit unfair because there's so many other people, and like every single person in Canada who was not a First Nations person was signed up to this view of the world. They thought they were doing a good thing by exterminating the First Nations. I mean, it's an appalling thing. I mean, and I quote this guy who I'd never heard of before, called I think Nicholas Flood Davin, who is an Irish immigrant, a complete toady, another person with a drink problem, as many 19th century Canadian figures did have. I mean, those were the times. Kind of a fraud, made up his own education. Seems to have been, pretty much a sort of compulsive liar who just creeped his way to the top, so to speak. And he was given a patronage job by Macdonald, which anybody who knows a little bit about Macdonald knows that he created the kind of Canadian patronage system where everything is about buying people off to do jobs for you. So he was sent on this job to America to find out about the American, what were called industrial schools, which was what the residential schools were called at first in Canada as well. And he came back and, you read it, it reads... I've never read the plans for concentration camps, but I would imagine that was very much the way that they would have been written. It's right there, almost in line one. This is aggressive civilization is the phrase that he uses. We are going to force these people to become us, come hell or high water. And the most important part of that is that we take the children away from the parents so that they can't grow up learning the lessons of the savages from their parents, So there's no ambiguity here. It's written in black and white. Now, you can say, well, Macdonald did great things and he's the founder of Canada, and that could be true. But, it's that old thing of like Mussolini made the trains run on time. Well, he may have done, but he's still Mussolini.
Well, it's one of those... The dichotomy of Canada is that you and I have had this conversation offline, is that there's the talk of let's cancel Canada Day this year, and so we're not going to get into that because it's too big of an issue for us to wade into. But it's one of these things like Canada is not perfect, and it'd be a crime to our history to ignore the triumphs that Canada has accomplished, and we've done a good deal many things that this country and everyone in this country should be very proud of. Our contribution to the defeat of Nazism and fascism in Europe, our contribution to science and technology, the Canadarm on the space shuttle, Dr. Banting and the introduction of insulin and whatnot, that all these things are great accomplishments, and we should be very proud of them, and we should hold our heads high when we talk about them. But we can't let that drown out the fact that bad things were done in our name to First Nations people. I want to bring it back to the removing of John A. Macdonald and the renaming of schools from Ryerson. I look at it and say, these statues are things. They are not our history. They're not consecrated monuments of our national history. I mean, there used to be a statue of John A. Macdonald in almost every town in Canada because people were just like, let's put up a statue. Who? I guess John A., because we don't know any other Canadian notables. And that's what they did. I don't get it. It's a thing. Like I ask anybody who wants to defend the statue of John A. Macdonald in the name of Canadian history. Describe his entire career to me in detail. Like tell me what notable accomplishment other than he brought in the Confederate. He brought in the BNA Act in 1867. What else did he do? And I'm not to say that he didn't do anything, but just let's be honest here. We're not talking about scholars of note here defending John A. Macdonald's legacy. Same as Ryerson.
It is. Well, if these people were truly worried about history, and some people just jump on the bandwagon because it's a simple bandwagon to jump on, but we're talking about people like Jason Kenney, who I presume has a brain somewhere in there. He gets that he's defending a story of Canada that props up his worldview. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a story. Stories are not history. Actual history, based on actual fact, is neutral. Like, the facts are the facts. The fact is that John A. Macdonald was the first Prime Minister of Canada who began the process of establishing the residential schools that then subsequent prime ministers took on and ran with, regardless of party, regardless of who they want. So, and people are absolutely complicated. You can be I think people who do know a bit about Macdonald, but don't know a huge amount, like the picture of this kind of very Canadian in some ways, bit of a boozer, bit of a charming guy, probably a real laugh to be around if you weren't a First Nations person or if you weren't Louis Riel or, but he was also a very, very successful politician who knew exactly how ruthless you have to be if you're going to stay Prime Minister of a country for decades on end. And he, by God, was he ruthless. When it comes to the spread west, by God, was he the most ruthless there.
Yes. What I always find about the statue and the naming of schools idea is that it says more about the people naming them or putting them up than it does with the individual themselves.
Absolutely,
I think it comes back to we look a bit southwards to the Americans and their debate on Confederate statues and whether or not they should come down or what have you. For the record, I think they should because they are literally statues of losers. But these statues didn't go up. It's not as soon as John A. Macdonald died. Oh, let's put up a statue in every town in Canada. That's not how it worked. The statues don't show up for like 100 years. They're not. They're usually products of, honestly, probably very rich, powerful men. And I do want to emphasize men in the town that they're erecting it, and they want a statue put up because that statue reflects their power and their vision of themselves, and they want to be associated with a narrative of greatness, of we're the custodians of legacy, and we get to write that legacy for generations to come. And if you don't, and we have to write it because that means we can determine if you want to be a part of it, you have to conform to our standards and our expectations. And again, it's usually white rich men who do this. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was just going to agree that, I mean, statues, all this kind of municipal architecture, this is all architecture of the state, right? These are ways of sending messages to a population from a time in the past when democracy was not like it is today, where, for all its many faults, we're free to say what the hell we want. When you put up a statue of John A. Macdonald, you're expressing the opinion that this is the only opinion you can have about this man. Right. You're not allowed to point out any flaws because he is a founding father. He is, we by putting him here, we are saying he is unambiguously good. Now, no one on the face of the earth has ever been unambiguously good. So you're starting off from the point of view of a lie. Take Nelson. So we have a Nelson school here in Burlington. Well, Nelson, he's another British military hero, very complicated person. He was kind of the equivalent of a pop star in his lifetime, and his popularity was such that his funeral had almost sort of millions of people turning up to. What did Nelson do for Canada? Nothing. Canada, well, it did exist, but he certainly never came here. Even so, we both knew John Boych, who's another person. A school was named after John Boych. We knew him, good friend. I didn't know him for very long, but for about a year and a half, 2 years. A wonderful, wonderful man. But even naming a school after him has its risks, because we don't know what the world will think in 100 years about this view or that view or the other view. And just in case Canada, you're thinking, well, this is crazy, why can't we name schools after things? Well, other countries don't necessarily do this. The country I grew up in doesn't name schools after people. It's a particular type of indoctrination that we're using when we use things in this way.
See, I was looking at, like, why do you not see any new statues being erected these days? Like, I was trying to think of another Canadian notable that would be erected, and the one before you hit play or hit record on this episode, Roland, one name did pop into my head, and that was Terry Fox. Mm-hmm. Listeners, do not worry. I'm not about to tear into Terry Fox. I think he.
Yeah, I think probably to clear that one.
I think he's probably one of the last true great Canadian heroes for that all Canadians can rally behind. But we don't raise statues to him in every town. But what I thought was interesting, and here in Burlington was one, and there are other communities who have done the same thing, is on his Marathon of Hope, the towns that he ran through, they've placed markers to mark the route. And I thought that was interesting because it would mark an event. It's not necessarily marking Terry Fox the man. It's marking what he did and the importance of that action. And I think if we want to talk about history and educating future generations of important things in this country, we need to stop getting away from the man and the women behind the actions, because they are all flawed, and sometimes things happen for far more than just one man or woman. We need, maybe if we want to start memorializing these things, we need to start marking places and events that these things happen. And to bring it back to the John A. Macdonald, as I was thinking of, I think it would be suitable to say, mark where the Canadian railway system started. That was something he did do, and it helped bring this country together. It helped bring commerce and actually grow it from 4 separate colonies into a country called Canada. He has to get recognition for that. But mark where the original railway went or where it started. At the same time, I believe every residential school in this country should be preserved as a testament to a bad decision. And yeah, his name and Ryerson's name should be on that monument as they did this. This was because of them. No one else. They bear the responsibility of what happened here and the generations of pain that came afterwards. And it'll be up to future generations to determine how do they reconcile that. And maybe they can't. Maybe that's the point, is we can't reconcile these two things. These are two truths that exist at the same time. And it's not about one is greater than the other and one erases the other. They don't. It happened. We have to live with it. That's the point. We have to live with the consequences of these actions and these decisions that happen.
Yeah. I mean, if there's truly going to be truth and reconciliation with the First Nations and with all the Indigenous peoples of Canada, it's going to come from every Canadian fully understanding all sides of their history, of it being taught, all sides of the history being taught in our classrooms, the good and the bad, not the mythology, not the War of 1812 that Stephen Harper wanted to make such a fuss about because, oh, hey, this is the one we won that had guns in it. It's like it's the only Canadian war when actually it isn't. But anyway, that's another story. That's looking at all sides of the experience of the people who lived in Canada during the age, before, during, and after, if you like. Because history is incredibly important, and part of the problem we're having right now is the fact that so few people actually know the history of Canada, and above all, what was done to the people who lived here first. The fact that they were treated as subhuman, who forcibly sterilized, starved, beaten, raped, buried under schoolyards. And not in small numbers. We're talking tens of thousands of people over decades and decades, again and again, in these schools which were completely handed over to religious institutions. The Catholic Church is getting a hard time, quite rightly, but you can point to the Anglicans, you can point to the Presbyterians as well. They ran these schools too. I think the Methodists did as well, which is today the United Church. This full understanding of the full breadth of the subject, which goes beyond singular names, that looks at not just John A. Macdonald, but John A. Macdonald's government, but also the government of Mackenzie, who came after him, of I'm trying to remember some Lion Mackenzie King, of Laurier, and of Trudeau, who wanted to abolish the Indian Act and abolish the state of being First Nations. That was something that Pierre Trudeau said in the 80s and 90s. People are complicated. I was just saying before we came on that one of the things that people throw at this discussion as if it is a counter argument that says we should just leave well alone is that Joseph Brant owned slaves. Which is like, yeah, that's terrible. No one's defending that. But people were extremely complicated, are capable of doing good things and terrible things in the same lifetime. And understanding the full breadth of that is the only way you're ever going to get to a proper understanding of where we are.
What I find interesting is that argument of, we can't take the name off here in Burlington, Joe Brant Hospital, or Brant Street that runs the main center of Burlington. We can't take the name off that. That's erasing history. First of all, no, like it was a white men who put the name Joe Brant on that hospital in very recent history too, mind you. But I find it interesting that we can't take the name of we can't take the name of a First Nations leader off an institution, but we also have to leave the name of leave the statue of the man who would force his descendants to go to residential schools. Yeah. That statue has to stay up. And it's just like this. I find that it's interesting. This grasping at straws to justify a fear of, and I would say it. I think it's a fear of ourselves. It's a sense of if our past is bad, if our past has so much evil in it, what does that make us? And it's something I've thought about it a lot over the last few weeks. Is Canada good or evil? And I don't know if we're necessarily anything. We're a country. We're a mixture of people of all shapes, sizes, colors, and backgrounds, creeds, and religions. And that's a good thing. And we're messy and we're complicated. I don't think it matters. I think what matters is what we do going forward. I think it matters. We can't apologize. We can't apologize for our ancestors. I can't apologize for what John A. Macdonald did. I can't apologize for what Alexander
Mackenzie, I think.
Mackenzie, thank you. Did or didn't do. What I can do is what are we going to do going forward? What are we going to demand of our leaders going forward? Let's move forward in harmony together. And we use the past to guide us. We know mistakes were made. We know bad choices were made. Bad choices that have consequences and bad choices that we have to live with today. We have to deal with this. It's not fair to us. It's not we didn't ask for it. We didn't want it. We didn't authorize it, but it's here. It's on us. It sucks to be us, but we have to deal with it. And we can either be the generation that kind of cops out and we try and both sides this and find some reason to shy away and not own up to it, or we suck it up and say, no, we're going to do it. We're going to take a step into the unknown. We're going to try and fix this, and then we're going to trip over our feet. We're going to make more mistakes along the way, but I want to believe that if we make the gestures in good faith and with a little bit of humility and a willingness to forgive ourselves and each other, we'll make it. But we can't be scared. We just can't be scared of it, and we can't be scared that we are the sins of our fathers, because we're not.
And you can't be scared of facts, because facts are facts. These are the facts of the matter.
Facts don't care about your feelings, Roland.
Yeah, well, they don't. It's
yeah, I know.
To be a descendant of European ancestors in North America or in Africa or in Asia or in Australia is to be descendants of people who did some pretty rotten things. That's just such a almost crass understatement I just made there. So we have to accept that. And our leaders, the Prime Minister has to do so much more than he has done so far.
Yes.
We need to start, this is a big deal. This was a genocide. If you look at the definition of the word that the man who actually invented the word gave it, this kind of thing, like only the Holocaust can be a proper genocide somewhere. This is ridiculous. No, this was an attempt to exterminate a people. It doesn't have to be gas chambers. It can be through starvation, abuse, forcing people to give up their languages, taking children from their mothers, forced sterilization, forced immigration. All these things count as genocidal acts. And when it's done systematically over a century and a half, that's genocide. We have to accept that. And you know what? This is what... When we heard Sean Van der Klees and Carl Dockstader, when we've had them on, talking about nation-to-nation talks, that has to happen. Someone like Trudeau has to be willing to go to Caledonia and to the Six Nations reserved there and sit down with those people and treat them with the dignity that they damn well deserve after everything that's happened. And you may get pissed off about heads on spikes and all that stuff. Well, of course they're pissed off. Jesus Christ. Do you not think they've got good reason?
And that's
treat people with dignity and treat the reconciliation process with much more seriousness than it has thus far. When it's treated with seriousness at all, it's about writing checks. This is about treating those nations, 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 like the nations they are, and with the respect that they need, if we're really going to deal with this.
Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it there for this week because I don't have anything much more to add to that conversation. unfortunately, I think this is going to be a conversation that we're going to be having on this podcast for future weeks, months, possibly years to come. But I don't see our opinion drastically changing one way or the other on this. We need to get past this notion of a grand mythological past and start looking at building a grander future for all Canadians, First Nations, those of us who've been here for a while, and the generations that are going to immigrate to this country, to make a better a country that we can all be proud of that we've built.
Good stuff.
All right.
We'll be back next week, people.
Take care. Bye-bye. That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.